Welcome to Build a Business Worth Buying, the podcast where seasoned entrepreneurs, M&A experts, and world-class operators share behind-the-scenes stories of building, scaling, and selling remarkable businesses. I'm your host, Aaron Alpeter, and every week I sit down with people shaping the world of acquisitions, founders who cashed out, buyers with bold strategies, and advisors who help make deals happen. This is not a podcast for beginners. It's for those who know the grind and want actionable insights to make their next big move. Get ready to take notes, rethink your strategy, and hear untold stories of what it takes to build a business worth buying. Today, I'm joined by Jamil Bhuya and Fenton. They are a Canadian power duo whose work spans entrepreneurship, design, and brand building. Jamil's the founder of Burgers and Fries Forever, which is a fast casual brand that grew from a single shop in Ottawa into a small but mighty restaurant group known for its inclusive ethos and brand voice and globally inspired menu. His journey with BFF from concept to expansion to exit taught him what it really means to build a community through brand and how operations, storytelling, and systems all intersect to create something that people actually crave. Jazz, on the other hand, was part of the early design team at a small company in Ottawa you might have heard of called Shopify. And she created the company's first UI and helped define its design language at a time when few people outside of Ottawa knew the name of Shopify. Her work helped set the tone for what would become one of the most influential design-led companies in all of e-commerce. Today, they're partners in life as well as business, and they're the co-founders of Other Half Studio, a brand consultancy that helps founders design the kind of businesses that last. Together, they bring a perspective of both a builder and a designer, one who's lived the realities of scaling from scratch, and one who's helped architect systems that scale others. And so I'm so excited to have Jamil and Jazz. Thank you guys so much for being on. You guys have both built things that people love, but they're in completely different worlds, right? So you've got restaurants and you've got e-commerce software. Mm-hmm. And I would like to hear from you, when you compare the experiences that you've had, what feels surprisingly similar about building something that really connects with consumers?
At the end of the day, whether you're building software, whether you're building food, whether you're building skincare, you're building for people. And I think that sometimes gets lost quite a bit under like KPIs, dashboards, analytics, financial statements. It's like you're still building with like some emotional outcome for the other person. So if it's a business service, that emotional outcome might be convenience. It might be knowledge. It might be leverage. We don't know, right? And same thing with like a consumer product. You might be selling happiness. You might be selling comfort. So I think that's like the thing that, ironically, it makes us all human, but it also what makes people like connect to your service or your product.
Mm-hmm. And also like I started in the product design world, which is very like the whole product thinking angle and just really thinking about human psychology and human behavior. I think that translates across everything. So like when it comes to the restaurant, right? Like you still have to think about how people behave and like human psychology and what drives them. And that's really integral to building a product, but then also building a brand or building like a product brand. And then now with the agency, like all of these things translate. It's just like, why do people behave the way that they do?
Is that something that you started with, or did you start with the product first and then you learn that part later on?
At Shopify specifically, with product design, there's so much research that goes on. Projects are very, very long. So you're really focused on super detailed pieces of something. There's a lot of like UX research, customer surveys, all that stuff before you even start designing. So there's like months and months of that before you even start to open your design tool and start working. But then also after you ship something, the philosophy at Shopify very early on was kind of like ship first, ask later. Like we want to kind of get something out there and then also see what real people who are using the tool, also how they react, and then iterate off of that. So yeah, there's kind of this balance of enough research before, so you're very clear on what you're building and why you're building it, but then also not being so married to it so that when you launch it, you're still going to iterate and not be upset that it didn't work exactly how you thought. So there's like two sides of it.
That makes a lot of sense. And Jamil, let's kind of go back to your earliest days at BFF. What did you learn about that experience that you think most founders miss?
I think the biggest thing I learned is how to actually prepare for, I don't want to say an exit, because at the time I never thought I was going to exit, or maybe it was, I think my head was like too high up in the clouds, if that makes sense. I was so optimistic to the point where maybe a little bit more nihilism and pessimism would have made me really review my shareholders agreement more, would have made me listen to my lawyer a little bit more, would have made me a little bit more conscious on personally guaranteeing my life away to the bank. It's very hard to like know what these things are until ironically you've either felt the pain of that mistake, and I think it's the boring stuff in a business. How to set up a corporation. What does your shareholders agreement look like if you have shareholders? What are the bylaws and resolutions in your corporation? What happens if you can't repay your loans? What is your cash flow looking like? Have you projected properly how much cash you're going to actually need? Because even those things, like running out of those type of resources, can cause a lot of emotional burden and stress that can actually make you a very shitty business owner and make very short-term decisions that are just trying to survive as opposed to long-term decisions and trying to grow because you're under-resourced and underprepared.
Yeah, what was it that you think led to the founder's fog or the amnesia or just the blatant optimism that you said you had when you were starting it that maybe you've had to unlearn or maybe you approach differently with other half?
It's kind of like what Jensen Huang says that when as he built NVIDIA, it's like you just gotta go through a lot of pain and like heartache and almost get like punched in the face a bunch of times for the lesson to stick. Like, not to sound nihilistic, maybe this is like the brown in me coming out. Like, I don't believe you learn something until it truly hurts. And even some of my mentors would tell me early on, like, hey, I'm going to tell you something, but you're probably not going to listen to me until, it hurts you or something happens.
Also, I feel like you kind of need that blind optimism when you start something. Like
Yeah.
Jamil was so young when he started the restaurant, and you kind of like if you knew all of those things and the hurt and the difficulties that were going to come, you probably just
I wouldn't have started.
You wouldn't have done it. So you kind of need to, everyone who starts a business, the first time they do it, it's new to them. And I think if it wasn't new to everyone, no one would do it. So you kind of have to like trial by fire, and then you'll learn for the next and the next, as you go.
Yeah, there's a reason why serial founders are a sought after commodity, right? Everybody wants to know, like, okay, what lessons have you learned that you're going to do differently for? And I'm curious, like, are there any things that come to mind that your mentors told you that at the time you said, this is nice, but I'll put that in the pile of things to worry about later, that now looking back, like, oh yeah, that was really, really wise.
I think one of them was don't hire friends and family, especially early on. And typically every time I hired someone that I knew really close, it was really hard to like keep that personal relationship professional. And eventually it just creates expectations and all these things that neither side can fulfill. So it almost always ends up in like a messy breakup. That was one. And then I think the other one was a lot of like legal advice, shareholders advice. And I think sometimes people are so eager to get a deal over the line that you're scared to say no to certain things in order to keep the deal moving. But the things you say yes to can have really big long-term ramifications, especially if you need to dissolve, exit, or like get away from the situation.
Makes a lot of sense. I'm reminded of a quote from one of the co-founders of Standard Oil. A friendship built on business is better than a business built on friendship. And I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, because I think you're right. It can be very difficult. I mean, these are obviously people that you trust, you want to work with them, but I always look at this and say, okay, if I hire someone and I have to fire them, can we still hang out? Like, how do you do this? And it's difficult, right? It's really hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's probably the biggest difference is I find that it's worked because obviously we're now in business together, right? But because we're both at the founder level and we're doing very different things, I think it works in that case. Like, it can work in certain circumstances, but yeah, I think when the dynamic is like you're the boss and then your friend is like technically under you, I think that's or family is under you, I think that's where the issues can kind of come up. But if obviously there's so many people who start businesses with their friends or their family, and it sometimes it doesn't work and sometimes it really, really works well, but I think the power dynamic has to be established before.
Yeah, I'll say one more quick thing on this subject. So even when Jazz and I started the skincare brand Yellow Beauty, we didn't have established roles, And it's not like we didn't trust each other, but we're always kind of like in each other's shit. And because of that, it was like I would try to moonlight as a designer and like I knew the brand so well, but like really I didn't.
Mhm.
Maybe it was even a bit mansplaining at the time, but like it just caused like a lot of friction for no reason. And now it's almost like we operate in two different silos. And like if I legitimately need her, vice versa, we'll chat with each other. But other than that, it's kind of like you do your thing, I'll do my thing. And then when we're done doing our things, we can just hang out, have dinner, and chat about other things.
Mhm.
That's a really interesting. I think that's instructive because what you're saying is that you've kind of created two halves, and you each have your own half, your own dominion, and
Mhm.
it's like we're all working toward this common goal. But you've got your sandbox, I've got mine, and stay out, right? For
Yeah.
lack of a better term. Is
She's
that
got the other half.
Yeah, there you go. Or yeah, exactly.
I
100%.
love that.
Mhm.
Jazz, you helped create the very first Shopify UI, which I think, like looking back, I don't know if anybody recognized that your design, your UI, was going to be as widely seen as it was. I mean, this impacted millions and millions of entrepreneurs as well
Mhm.
as consumers. What is
Yeah.
it like designing something that had to scale far beyond its original scope?
Yeah, so I worked on the first iteration of Shopify Home, which is actually still pretty much the same as when I left. Like they've
Wow.
obviously done a lot of things to it, but it's like the concept is still similar. Um, I mean, yeah, I was at Shopify fairly early on, like 2013 to 2015. So we knew it was already really big, but we didn't know how big it was going to be. So yeah, but again, like thinking for the long term, every project, like I said, was very in depth. We'd focus on like very minuscule things and focus on like user behavior, like I was saying, and just like what the long term goals were. But also, there was this huge culture of, we don't know where this is going to go, and we have to be okay to like build something and then break it down and then build it and break it down. So there wasn't much rigidness in like, oh my God, we need to prepare this for the next 10 years. It was more like, what do people need now? And knowing that this is something that's going to keep iterating and changing over time. So, yeah, there wasn't really that pressure of this needs to stand the test of time. It was more like, what can we do now that's different than everyone else is doing? And how can we make sure that it's just like the best for the merchants, like the best experience for them with what they need right now?
That makes a
Mhm.
lot of sense. Was it such that when you guys were making that design that you were approaching it's like this just has to be good enough for 2 years, and knowing that you could potentially scrap the whole thing, and then you got to a point where you just renewed it and said, all right, well, what's good here? Actually, a lot of it's good, so let's kind of renew for another 2 years. Or was there a thought that, hey, once we get this going, it's going to be kind of like Excel, and anytime somebody updates Excel, the ribbon or whatever, people just freak out. It's like, where is everything? So I guess
Right.
how did you guys approach that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was more of, again, like knowing that this specific industry, especially at the time, it was changing so quickly. So I think, yeah, it was more of making also the merchants used to things changing a lot, right? Like we would change things based on user feedback, and like it would just constantly be an iteration. So it wasn't, we didn't want things to be a shock when things were updated, because we did update things a lot. And sometimes we would start projects and, you know, almost ship them and then be like, wait, this isn't the right thing to do right now. We need to completely scrap it and go back to the drawing board. So yeah, I think the roadmap was like, again, with what I was working on, everyone was working on very different things. Because by the time that I joined, we were still big enough that every different part of the admin, for example, every different section had an entirely different team, right? So we would be like very, very fixated on the specific problem that we were building for. So there was like a whole team for the orders screen, and there was a whole team for Shopify payments specifically. So yeah, very like very focused thinking across that specific product.
That makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
What do you see in the founders that you're working with, or folks that are looking to build something that's going to scale at one point, where you can see that sort of mentality coming out in what they're doing? Or is that something where you can be the one giving advice that they may not be listening to, and saying, hey, I know you may not listen to me right now, but this is something you're going to run into?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think if you try and build too far in the future, you're going to just be paralyzed, because it's like I said, things are changing so quickly, like now with AI and all this stuff. You can't think too far ahead. Make sure that you're using what's available to you now and like make something that's amazing now, and be okay with constant change. I see so many founders being like almost paralyzed. I need to make this a business that's going to last for 50 years. Like, and then they're just not actually doing anything. They're just kind of overthinking the entire process. And business isn't like that. It's constantly changing every day. There's something that's going to be thrown at you. So being okay with iteration and change is really important.
Things move very quickly, and like a lot of bigger clients that are redoing their store every year and like redesigning and trying to like keep current or be trendy or just like getting like a different look at it. Whereas opposed to like, when I had the restaurants, like we can't renovate every year. Like at best case scenario, you're renovating every 5 years. Worst case, every 10 years to keep like current and modern. Whereas like a digital asset is just so much easier to kind of like iterate, refresh. And we have seen quite a bit of that.
Yeah, that really resonates with me. As you guys were talking, I'm reminded of a couple conversations I had with founders. They'll kind of show you their pitch deck and like, oh, we're going to be $1 billion company in 10 years, right? And so like that's the goal. I think that's helpful to show for investors, and that's nice there. But I think the problem that a lot of people run into, and I'm kind of hearing this in what you're saying, is that it can be nice to have that goal of being $1 billion company, but you should focus on being $1 million company before you're $1 billion company. Don't go out and build the $1 billion infrastructure, the $1 billion headcount, or things like that, unless you have $5 billion to spend, right? And to test things out. So I think it's less about like swinging for the grand slam each time. It's more about how do you get on base? How do you advance the runner? How do you keep going? And so I think that's a really important thing as it gets to trying to figure those things out.
Yeah.
I love that analogy too, because like trying to figure out even where your off ramps are on the road to $1 billion, even for my restaurants. Like last year, we were lucky to get acquired, and my new partner used to be the CEO of Mary Brown's Chicken, and he grew it from like 100 to 400 locations. And I had told my old partner at the time that, hey, I don't have what it takes to take this thing to the next level. I've realized that now. Like when I started this thing, I thought I could take it to 100 units. I was like, I don't really have what it takes, and I don't have the energy to do it anymore. And I think it's like really important. Like you could still become $1 billion company, but like I realized I'm more of like a 0 to 1 or a 0 to 10 type of guy. Who am I kidding? Maybe I'm a 0 to 5 at best, but like to take something to $1 billion, I know I'll never be that guy. So it's like even having strategic off ramps of like, maybe when do I take some chips off the table? What does that mean? Where do I get to a certain level of dilution where I don't have control anymore? I think understanding those things like early on is almost as important as building the product at times sometimes.
Yeah. And also just knowing you do need that high level goal of what are you growing towards, because there can also just be this blind growth for the sake of growth, and you don't really know where you're going. And a lot of the time too, like a lot of growth can look good from the outside, but really when you like tear back everything, maybe you now have 50 employees, but you're dying, like your business is dying, right? Like optically it might look good, but then another business that has 10 employees and they've been very careful about what they're doing and why they're doing it intentionally, they might be killing it and having an amazing profit. So it's like the optics too, I think, can be enticing for a lot of business owners. It's like, I want to look big. I want to like grow fast, hire fast, do all this stuff. But it's like, why? Why are you doing it?
I want to raise and dilute because it's sexy and I see everybody else doing it.
Yeah. So I think that's what we've been really trying to do with Other Half now, is being really, because we've had other experiences about, with other businesses, we're like, okay, every time there's a certain decision point, even about hiring or a service that we're going to offer or any of these things, it's like, okay, what does that actually mean long term? I think those goals are really important to think about long term.
Or just simply why? Like, why are we doing this? It's always going back to like, why did we start this? Because with our other two businesses, we didn't know why.
Yeah.
We really didn't know why. And it's a simple but very complex question.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one that my wife asks every now and then, and it's an uncomfortable conversation for sure. It's like, so let me get this right. You're doing this amount of work and you're taking home how much money and you have this much stress, and like, what are we doing here? Right. So, I think that definitely resonates with me. And I'm so glad you guys brought up just the idea of profit, because I feel like there's a whole generation of founders that grew up in the zero interest rate environment, and
Mhm.
the success criteria was I raised a bunch of money, or that
Yeah.
my revenue was really high, or things like that. And the reality is, and people are learning this today, is that profit is the whole point of running a business.
Yeah.
These things are meant to be machines that make money that you get to take home out of nothing. Like that's the whole point of it. Your
Mhm.
profit is your right to continue to exist. And
Yes.
I think that if you're looking at these things and you're just like, if I'm a $50 million company, but I've got $500,000 in profit, that's different than if I'm a $10 million company. I've got $5 million in profit. That's a very different lifestyle, very different,
Yeah.
stress level, and it can be really hard as a founder to say, well, maybe I shouldn't spend all this money, right? Like I
Yeah.
know I've had a problem as I've grown through the years. It's just how do I, avoid burning a hole in my pocket with just profits that are coming off. Like, well, how do we put this to work? Like I don't want it necessarily, but what do I do? And so I'm just really glad you guys brought that up, because I think so many people have to relearn that lesson, that the whole point of building your company and the whole point of why someone would buy your company is because it can generate profit.
Yeah, a very big reality is a lot of businesses can become this prison, right? Where you've done it to give yourself freedom, and then you're now trapped, like in the case of the restaurant, right? You had so many personally guaranteed loans that like Jamil took on when he was very young. So we didn't have, a car or a house or like we didn't have any assets. So we're like, okay, well, of course we'll take this loan, and of course these loans follow you for years and years and years. They're not easy things to pay off. So yeah, just kind of again, like thinking why you're doing what you're doing, and yeah, just being intentional, I think is important.
I want to touch on something you said quickly because it's something that I use as almost like a lesson learned or a clap back to a lot of young founders that ask me like, "Hey, like what did you do back then that's different than now?" And literally one of the things I say is back then money was cheap. Inflation wasn't a thing. No one knew what inflation was. Money was cheap. It was easy to get capital. Like the economy was stable. It was good. Like just we lived in a different time when I started not only the restaurants, but when Jazz and I started the skincare company. And I think the table stakes have been raised so much more now where it's harder than ever to even like get someone to pay attention to your startup. And there's so much noise in the market between AI, vibe coding, all these like terms and trends, and just having access to more media and like just more ideas than ever. Like we're so interconnected through social media and all these things that it can be very distracting, but also very polarizing, like the messages you can be getting, and that can really mess with your head as to what the expectations of your business should be.
I definitely agree with that. It reminds me, a couple of years ago, I was mentoring a startup from Ukraine, and this was before the second invasion, the big one. And we were just kind of talking, and I was learning a little bit more about their ecosystem. They were trying to get in the U.S., so obviously, I was teaching them about ours. But it's like, well, what is it like there? It's like, well, it's very difficult to raise money in Ukraine, and as a result, you have to be profitable from day one.
Mhm.
And so you get these companies where it's a side project, and maybe it's throwing off a couple $1,000 or whatever. Like you're just nurturing, you're trying to figure out, you're iterating, you're being very specific about how you spend money and how you hire and all those sorts of things. He says it's really hard for these companies to get formed. Once they get formed, they turn into Duolingo, right? They turn into these massive companies that because they were able to figure out and they had good unit economics, they were profitable from day one, that they were able to kind of blast it. Where I think in North America, to your point, Jamil, it was very easy for someone who had a WeWork membership and an idea to raise $1 million to go figure something out.
Yeah.
And if you were maybe you're acquiring customers on negative unit economics, and you just like, well, I'll figure it out, let me raise more money. It's like, no. Like I think that as difficult as this environment is right now compared to where it's been, which let's be honest, it's still not that difficult compared to where it could be elsewhere.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think that this is ultimately better for the ecosystem,
Yeah.
because it's going to push people to maybe not have completely rose-colored glasses, but as we talked about, you've got to still be optimistic and think that it's going to work and have the audacity that you're going to be the one to make it happen.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of like I don't want to say the gravy train has ended, because to your point, I think it's just more of a balanced market, and there's more critical thinking. But also again, there's so much hype out there, right? Like we saw it with Bitcoin, we saw it with NFTs, we're seeing it with AI right now, and it's like you gotta feed the beast. That's kind of what I say nowadays, and I think that beast is the hype.
Yeah. So let's kind of go into that a little bit more, because you guys both worked in relatively unproven places, right? When you're building another, obviously you haven't built a design studio before. You're doing that for the first time, although you've both been around them.
Mm-hmm.
How do you balance kind of that rose-colored glass conviction that a founder has to have to basically convince themselves that the pain is worth it for however long or however deep it's going to be, while still being grounded and rooted in this idea that, hey, there's got to be a purpose and a point to why we're doing this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, yeah, like the purpose for me, like having a lot of the past experience, I think I know what kind of life we want to lead. So that's really established like why we're doing what we're doing and how we want to do it. Specifically with the agency, we have a lot of specific philosophies on how we want to do things that are different than traditional agencies. But then the blind optimism, or maybe not, it doesn't feel as blind this time for some reason. I don't know if it's because this is the first time where we are actually taking a solid skill that I've developed and that you've developed, like me on the design side and then Jamil on the sales side. He's just like, over the course of all of his businesses and things that he's done, he's become an amazing like networker and salesperson. And then I've become a strong designer. So it's like we're finally very secure in those skills. So we have optimism, but it feels more targeted and like tangible than before. Before it was more like, oh, we see all these other restaurants doing well. I think we could do that. Or I see all these D2C brands killing it online, all these like drop shippers, they're just like making millions. And it's like, let's try and do that. But we didn't really have any tangible past experience of like in those areas, really. Like I was adjacent to that via Shopify, but I wasn't a business owner. I had never created a product. Jamil had worked in kitchens, but he never ran a restaurant. So there was a lot of blindness of just being like, we want to do that, but we don't know exactly how. Whereas this time I feel like, and again, we had to go through a lot of pain to get here and a lot of skill building to get here. But now it kind of feels like, okay, there's optimism for a reason. So it's not easy, but it just feels easier than the other.
It almost sounds like what you're just saying is that everybody has ideas. Ideas are cheap. You can identify the what, right? You want to have a profitable skincare brand. You want to have an empire. So everybody's like looks at the outcome, but if you don't know the how, maybe that's where it becomes blind optimism versus more mitigated risk.
Yeah, like I think we just feel more experienced now. And I think also with the skincare brand in particular, and with the restaurant to an extent, we didn't, both of us, we didn't really go out and ask for help at all, really. Yeah, like we were just kind of like, okay, we see other people killing it. That means we can probably kill it too. And like, it seemed like everyone was doing it just by themselves. So I think though too, like even if you do have that blind optimism, because obviously everyone starts somewhere, you just have to tap into the community and like be not afraid to embarrass yourself or like that you're just starting out and go talk to people who are doing well. We never really did that because we just thought, well, everyone else did it by themselves. So I guess that's what we have to do.
I just had like a funny thought and I don't know why it came to my head, but I was like, humans are like the only creatures in the world that could decide, okay, you know what? I'm gonna do all these crazy weird things, including commerce, right?
You don't see a bird being like, let's start a
You don't see a bird being like, hey, I'm gonna become a barista suddenly and open like a little coffee shop on top of this like electrical pole and pay rent to like my squirrel landlord.
I wish they did that,
right?
Though.
Like, and I think to answer your question, like there was a lot of intersections of like past experience, pain, but also like economics that we really like. Don't get me wrong, this business kind of happened accidentally. Like Jazz had left last year in June, her agency. She just kept getting slammed with freelance work.
Yeah, it was just freelancing. So it also happened by accident as well.
And
kind
I
of.
was having so much fun attending ecom events because I was so damn burnt out from restaurants. And I thought it was a very toxic environment. The people there are just very like, they're hard workers, but it was to a level and degree where there's just it's not the same collaboration that there is in ecom or in tech even. So it was kind of like we had so much trauma from other things that we had done that it almost ended up feeling so easy and natural
Like fun.
and
Fun for
fun.
you.
Like
Yeah.
for me, it was just like, holy shit, I have an out from the restaurant industry, and it was just like I haven't had this level of energy in like probably 12 years, and like a good 5 years where I was just like a corpse, and like I wouldn't go to events. I I wouldn't like do the things that felt natural to me because everything was so hard. Whereas now it's like I just focus on what naturally feels good. And to me, it's the schmooze. Like I don't go out there trying to sell to people. I go out there just trying to like build relationships, become friends. You either like me or you don't. If you can manage me for a second or third call, like, okay, this guy is, like, hey, he's a cool guy. Like, let's continue chatting. Like, it's building those relationships because, like, we're in the business kind of trust, right? It's like you have a digital product on a digital service on people are coming, like, everything's digital, right? Like, e-commerce is very digital until you actually receive the parcel. So it requires a lot of trust. And that trust is built IRL so much faster than it ever would be over a screen, which really was like in my wheelhouse because of my experience with the restaurant. So everything kind of worked out. Also, like agencies require very little investment overhead, they cash flowing typically from day one. So like a lot of those lessons from before was like, do I want to take $250,000, $500,000 debt out to start something new in a new industry? No, So, yeah, just kind of made sense.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that this happened accidentally. One of the things I'll kind of joke around with people when I meet it the first time is they hear about the different companies that we have, and they're like, "Well, what was your grand plan for doing them?" And I literally say this happened accidentally on purpose. It was one
Right.
step in front of the other, and you look and you make the best decision you think of at the time. Hopefully, it turns out being a good decision years down the road, but I think it's a fascinating thing, and maybe there's something to that where the best business ideas shouldn't feel like it's a chore. It should feel like it's something that's coming out of that. And Jim,
Mhm.
since you brought up, I kind of want to dig into your experience with scaling BFF, and what went well, what caused that burnout, and did that change kind of your thinking around exits and exits? Because the business itself is well loved, the food is great, but it can still be something where it becomes less of a passion project and more of a millstone around your neck.
I think I always had partners that didn't compliment or build me up, right? So it's kind of like I have a very particular skill set now that I've realized. Um, and having like a really strong operator or someone that was a little bit more grounded and that could execute better. Like I'm not the best at executing, right? Like that's not my core strength. I'm not like an ops guy per se. I'm more marketing, sales, visions,
Like big
leadership
picture.
type, big picture. But because of that, I can kind of be too big picture and all over the place. And so like it can really affect my ability to execute. And I've learned that now and I'm comfortable saying it. Maybe 5 years ago I would have never admitted that, but I think now it's like very dialed in. So with BFF, the biggest things I struggled with was just I didn't take certain things seriously, where it's like I valued what I valued, but because I didn't value everything else, it would kind of bleed over into the company. So like my attention to detail wasn't as strong as what's needed for like a scaling QSR brand, because those details really matter. If you're not cooking food properly, if you're not putting the right items on something, if my burger here isn't as same as my burger there, at another location, like those things really affect things. If the build outs at each location feel slightly different and like while they both look really cool, if you walk into one shop versus the other, like am I in the same place? Um, even just like some of my erraticness with like decision making, I'd be very willing to pivot on a dime without thinking about how this is going to affect, the store, the inventory, the staff, even like printing out flyers and things like that. All these things really matter. So I think for myself, it was really just like not having a stronger complement to like my weaknesses, and over time letting the things that I suck at drain the life out of me. So now I'm no longer good at the things that I'm actually good at, if that makes any sense.
No, that makes perfect sense to me. And I think that, it's hard because everybody, I think, to some degree struggles with execution if they're
Yeah.
not passionate about the thing they're executing. I'm sure that there were things that were, kind of out there that you really got energized by, that you were doubling down. You're like, look, I'll stay up till 4 a.m. and I'll do this thing because it's cool. And there's other stuff that probably would have taken you 10 minutes. You're like, I ain't got time for that. Like, I'm
I'm
not
not
going to
like
do that.
yeah.
And so I think it's part of this is yes, it's everybody struggles with execution. It might be just finding your passion in the business and where you're getting energy from. I wonder, as you guys are thinking about building Other Half together now, how did you identify which areas you guys have natural passions for and what areas neither of you have a passion for? You're like, look, we know that we're gonna have to bring somebody else in who really cares about this particular thing.
Right. I mean, yeah, I think it was pretty easy to identify our own passions. Like to your point that you just said of like execution, I love that side of things. So from basically how we split things now is like Jamil goes out to all the events, he does all the outreach, all the sales calls, all the discovery, and then basically once we have a project, now that's handed over to me. So we have these kind of two separate worlds. A big unlock for us is before when Jamil would want to go to an event, he'd be like, okay, well, you're coming with me. And I'm like, well, I don't really want to go. So then he would feel bad and he wouldn't go. And then we eventually realized, or you eventually realized, that I am fine with you going. I just don't want to go. I would rather stay at home and
Sometimes she
do,
needs a break from me.
but not even you. I, I just get drained by those types of like networking is not something that I enjoy. Even I'm kind of like a extroverted introvert or whatever you call that. Like it doesn't feed me, whereas he can do 5 events in one day and be like, yeah, tomorrow I'm doing another 5. So like identifying that, I think that's been very easy because you don't like doing kind of those tedious tasks. I don't mind it at all. But then I guess what we're both not good at, I mean, again, we've never done this before, so it's more from the sense of scaling this and like where do we want to take this and what does setting up our agency look like for maybe it is eventually an acquisition or a merger or things like that. Like what do we have to do from an operations side and from, the proper margins and things like that. That's something that we know that we don't actually know fully. So we've been working with someone who has been there, done that very early on, which some people might think, oh, that's super early. You've only been around for less than a year. But we knew when we found this person, we're like, okay, we need to just sync with him once a week, just have someone as a sounding board that has been there, done that at a much larger scale than us, and who understands, because we also didn't want to get advice from someone who would also be pushing for us to build an agency that like the type of agency that we didn't want. So for example, we're trying to build a very asynchronous agency, something that allows our designers to design and not be on calls all day. The way that we approach it is like, we want to give senior talent who have probably been burnt out from agency life in their 20s, when they get into their 30s and up, that they can still do what they love and not be completely burnt out and not able to perform. So we're kind of creating this different type of agency model. So we wanted someone who also understood that while still helping us be like, okay, but you need to have certain things in place from a business side so that we're not just like flying into the dark like with our other businesses, and just, again, growth for the sake of growth is not something that we want. We want to be sure that, okay, like where can we sit where we know that we are living a good lifestyle, we're not working 24/7, we still can live our life, our team can live their life, but maybe we'll still be attractive to, a future exit in some capacity, whatever that looks like down the road.
Pretty early on, we recognized like we need to find someone who's been there, done that, but we actually need to like and respect what they say, because we've met some other people who've been there, done that, and we see them as a person and everything. And again, no shade to them. Like, I'm sure a lot of people can't stand me, but I was like, oh my God, I can't stand the way you think about life and work.
Yeah, they're just creating like their type of lifestyle is not what we want. So if that doesn't align, that doesn't make sense. And then also even thinking about the concept of an acquisition, or we've just been learning a little bit more about the difference between acquisitions and mergers and how that maybe is more attractive. We also don't want to, again, like, we really care about our team and we love what we do as well. So it's like, if that is something that is in the roadmap, how can we do it in a way that's like, again, I'm using the word intentional, but very intentional with like who we would decide to partner with. And it's not like, we never want to get to the point, which kind of happened with the restaurant at a certain point, where it was like, it was a reaction, like, I have to get out now, I have to find someone. We don't ever want to be at the point where we're like just picking the first person that wants to acquire us or to merge with us. We want it to be like a very
you don't want a gun to your head exit.
Yeah, we want to feel good about it, and we want to potentially keep working with that new system as well. So yeah,
or we don't have to,
or we don't have to, but just being very clear about that, and not we just never want it to be a reactionary experience. We want it to be that like we are in the driver's seat this time,
because we've had 2 reactions already.
Yeah.
Third time's a charm, right?
Yeah.
I think what you're saying, it makes a lot of sense. And intentionality and optionality are 2 sides of the same coin, right? Yes. If you are building toward an exit, that doesn't mean that you have to sell, but it also means that you're going to have clean financials. You're going to have well-documented processes. You're going to, have the right HR structure, so that, if someone did want to come in and pick up your business, it's not dependent on you. And I think that, having optionality is something that's so important these days, and we're seeing it more and more, because you don't know if, you're going to need that extra cash buffer to weather tariffs, or you're going to have to weather, a downturn in the economy or things like that. And the companies that get the right to exist are the ones that have options. And it doesn't necessarily mean that, to your point, I've got one option and a deal I can't refuse, and, that's what I have to do. Typically, I mean, those companies that are going to be acquisitive are going to be the ones that do have the war chest, or do have the abilities to say, hey, you've got something good there, but, put it onto our chassis, and we'll lead and do those sorts of things. So I think it's just an interesting kind of element that way. And I'm curious, as you guys interact with all these different types of brands in the agency, and just, Jamil, as you're meeting different people, there's a difference between growth and momentum, right? There's a difference between somebody who has the hype, or who, has the PR, or is, has the tailwinds. And there's a difference between folks that have a meaningful, repeatable business that goes through. And I'm curious, what do you guys see in your clients or prospective clients that helps you understand if this is a company with real staying power, or one that is, maybe not as durable as they think it is?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And it's something we get faced with a lot, because I always say, like, maybe I'm being a little nihilistic. I always tell people, I'm like, we're nobodies. We're trying to get our name out there. We're trying to really, build our brand. And I think one of the things that really get told a lot is, like, we always say we're a project-based agency, but then everyone we talk to, they're like, you need more retainers. You need more retainers. You need a way to make it sticky. And I was like, yes, I agree with you, but we're so small. Like, now we're 5 people. I shouldn't keep saying we're so small, but like, we're getting bigger and we're looking to grow, but like, there's still so much room to grow in, like, even just our very narrow niche that we're in, which is mostly like D2C redesigns or custom builds, where it's like there's so many like adjacent revenue kind of fields, like retainers and just like ongoing dev work and support. But like, we're really trying to build our brand first, so that all the other funnels that we're doing, like, I go hard on LinkedIn, I go hard at events, we're all trying to like build as many kind of like inbound systems as possible, even though that they might not seem super systemized. It's like, hey, how can we create like 3 to 5 very good inbound streams and like just focus on that? Whereas before in the past, I'd try to do everything. It's like I had to be on Twitter, I had to be on this, I had to be on Instagram, I had to be on all these things, I had to do a newsletter, and then you're just not doing any of them well at all. But also realizing that like it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. If something is working, in the past, I would have been like, I got to do something new right away while this thing is good. But that was kind of like a lacking mindset. Whereas now I'm like, this is working. I'm going to double, triple, quadruple down on it. I'm going to bleed this thing dry, while it's working and not focus on anything else. And I think that's been like a huge shift.
That's awesome. Well, guys, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for making time and for sharing your stories and just your wisdom. We've got 2 questions that we always like to ask on Build a Business with Buying. What's the best example of a moat that you've seen another business build?
I think ironically, like Shopify, their moat is their ecosystem of app partners, and like just everyone's so plugged in. Like the support is great, the actual vendors are amazing, and they've just built such a robust ecosystem where they built this amazing like foundational structure, and now they've opened up like a whole new like world, a whole new subset of business that's so reliant on Shopify and its ecosystem, much less the convenience, scalability, security, and payment side. It's like you have 3PLs like yourself, you have media companies, you have all these little apps that do such like minute functions that are literally like 8-9 figure businesses that you're like, what the hell? Like, and I think that ecosystem, I think like they're at what, like 15,000 apps and partners. It's like, it's so plugged in that like trying to take that down, I think that's an amazing moat that they built, because it really relies on like great people and partners, which is what builds a business. It's not relying on tools and tech. I think the tools and tech, that's table stakes. Like you got to have that, especially in the e-com D2C world. But I think it's the how they built that ecosystem of app partners and the people that it's brought together. I think that's their moat.
Good answer.
That's good. That's good. And if you guys had to start over today and you were going to build a physical product company, how would you go about building a business worth buying?
So yeah, I think to my point before, the biggest differentiator is just not building in a silo, like not building by yourself. If we were to launch another product brand, we would probably first also align ourselves with other founders and like create a little bit of a larger founding team of people who have been there, done that. And again, we like have these complementary skills, the ones that we're missing. And I think the key one for us for a product brand would be, we've never scaled a product brand to like multi-millions. So we would want to be aligned with someone in some capacity who has done something like that and has been there before. And then just like talking about it. I think that's the biggest difference. Again, I know I say like building in a silo, but it's not as much like just getting out. It's also talking about what you're doing and like not being afraid to just like say it over and over and like post about it and all of these things. So just like being more public, building in public, I think is really important, because people like to support people trying something for the first time. You just have to be okay putting yourself out there and like sharing the mistakes and all of that stuff. So
I'll build on that and just say like probably not chasing like a trend or something that's hot, especially with product. It's like I used to very much believe that like, the first mover advantage is real, and it is very real, but also first movers can get into maybe an industry or a category or a product that doesn't have massive market share. It might be hot for a little bit. So it's kind of like, and the speed that you need to execute and iterate at can actually be detrimental to its long-term growth as things kind of fizzle out. Like we've seen it with so many different tools and industries and even trends. We were actually ironically talking about fidget spinners the other day, and I remember I had such FOMO about them being like, holy shit, like
all the drop shippers,
these guys made like how much in like how long, and this thing costs like $1. Like
That's a stressful place to be, constantly having to pivot, right?
Yeah.
Like constantly.
So it's really like building with like a long-term, like a long-term plan in mind, but like really taking your time. Like it's a marathon, not a sprint. I think that's like the best way to describe it if I were to do a product brand again.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. Well, Jazz, Jamil, thank you so much for being on Build a Business Worth Buying. And I've learned a lot. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for joining me on Build a Business Worth Buying, brought to you by ISBA Consulting. I hope today's conversation gave you real insights into scaling smarter, selling better, and thinking like a strategic operator. If you found value in this episode, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who's building their own sellable business. Until next time, remember, the real win isn't just building a business, it's building one worth buying.